Sarah Martinez had always prided herself on being smart and careful. At 25, she worked as a data analyst for a tech company in downtown Seattle. Her life was ordinary, predictable, and safe. She lived alone in a small apartment, kept to herself, and rarely ventured out after dark. But all of that changed on a rainy Thursday evening in October. She was walking home from work when she noticed the black sedan following her. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. The car had been behind her for 3 blocks, matching her pace perfectly. When she turned left onto Pine Street, the sedan turned too. When she stopped at the corner store to buy milk, the car parked across the street and waited. Sarah's heart began to race. She pulled out her phone and pretended to make a call while watching the car in the store's reflection. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but she could make out the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. The person seemed to be watching her. She decided to test her theory. Instead of going straight home, she took a longer route through the University District. The sedan followed every turn. When she ducked into a busy coffee shop, the car pulled into a parking spot with a clear view of the entrance. Sarah ordered a latte with shaking hands and found a seat by the window where she could watch the street. For 20 minutes, the car didn't move. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Was someone stalking her? Had she witnessed something she shouldn't have? She couldn't think of any reason why someone would follow her. She lived a quiet life, had no enemies, and hadn't been involved in anything dangerous or illegal. As she sat there, trying to figure out what to do, a man approached her table. He was tall and thin, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. His face was unremarkable, the kind that would blend into any crowd. He sat down across from her without being invited. "You're in danger," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. "That car outside has been following you for days, not just today." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Who are you? How do you know that?" "My name is David Chen. I'm a private investigator, and I've been hired to watch you." He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a business card. "But I think you need to know what's really going on." Sarah stared at the card. It looked legitimate, with a Seattle address and phone number. "Someone hired you to watch me? Why?" David glanced around the coffee shop before leaning closer. "A man named Vincent Cortez paid me to keep track of your movements. He said you were his niece and he was worried about your safety. But something doesn't add up. I've been doing this job for 8 years and this feels wrong." Vincent Cortez. Sarah had never heard the name before. "I don't have any uncles named Vincent. My father was an only child, and my mother only had one sister who died 5 years ago." David nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of. This morning, Cortez called and gave me new instructions. He wants me to approach you tonight and gain your trust. He said to tell you that your life is in danger and that I'm here to protect you." Sarah felt sick. "But that's exactly what you just did." "Yes, but I'm telling you the truth about it. He wants me to convince you to come with me to a safe house. He said people are trying to hurt you because of something your father was involved in before he died." Sarah's father had died in a car accident 3 years ago. He had been an accountant for a small firm and lived a completely normal life. "My father wasn't involved in anything dangerous. He did taxes for small businesses, I know. I looked into your background when I took this job. Your father, Robert Martinez, was clean. No criminal connections, no debts, no enemies. Your whole family is completely ordinary. That's why this doesn't make sense." David pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was a middle-aged man with dark hair and cold eyes. "This is Vincent Cortez. Have you ever seen him before?" Sarah studied the picture carefully. The man was completely unfamiliar. "Never. I've never seen him in my life. He paid me $5,000 up front and promised another 5 when the job is done. That's way too much money for a simple protection detail. People don't pay that kind of money unless something big is at stake." Sarah looked out the window. The black sedan was still there. "So what do you think is really happening?" David was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I think you're being used as bait. Cortez wants something, and he thinks that by controlling you, he can get it. But he needed someone like me to make it look legitimate, to make you trust him. Bait for what? I don't have anything valuable. I don't know any secrets. I'm nobody special. Maybe it's not about what you know or what you have. Maybe it's about who you are or where you come from. Sometimes people get targeted because of their connections to other people, even if they don't know about those connections." Sarah thought about her family. Her parents had been simple, hardworking people. Her mother worked as a nurse, her father as an accountant. They had lived in the same house for 20 years, went to church on Sundays, and never caused trouble for anyone. After her father died, her mother had moved to Arizona to live with her sister. Sarah couldn't think of any reason why anyone would be interested in her family. "What should I do?" she asked. David looked serious. "Cortez is expecting me to bring you to him tonight. If I don't show up with you, he's going to know something went wrong. That black sedan out there might not be the only people watching you. Are you saying there are more of them? I don't know. But we need to assume the worst. Here's what I think we should do. We leave together. But instead of going to Cortez's safe house, we go to the police. You file a report about being followed and threatened. I'll give them everything I know about Cortez and this whole operation." Sarah nodded. It seemed like the only logical choice. "Okay, but what if the police don't believe us?" "They'll believe us. I have recordings of my conversations with Cortez and photos of the money he gave me. This is clearly some kind of criminal conspiracy, even if we don't understand what it's about yet." They finished their coffee and prepared to leave. David went first, walking casually toward the back exit. Sarah waited 5 minutes before following. The plan was to meet at his car in the alley behind the coffee shop. But as Sarah stepped out the back door, she realized they had made a terrible mistake. The alley was dark and empty, and David was nowhere to be seen. Instead, 3 men in dark clothing were waiting for her. They had been expecting this move. One of them stepped forward. "Ms. Martinez, we need you to come with us. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Sarah turned to run back into the coffee shop, but another man was blocking the door. She was trapped in the alley with nowhere to go. Her heart pounded as she realized that whatever was happening to her was much bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. The men moved quickly and efficiently, like they had done this before. Before Sarah could scream, one of them placed a cloth over her mouth and nose. The smell was sweet and chemical, and within seconds her vision began to blur. Her legs gave out, and the last thing she remembered was being lifted into a van. When Sarah woke up, she was sitting in a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Her hands were tied behind her back with plastic zip ties, and her ankles were bound to the chair legs. The space was huge and mostly empty, with high ceilings and broken windows that let in streams of gray daylight. She could hear traffic in the distance, but it sounded muffled, like they were far from the main roads. A man was sitting across from her at a small metal table. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the rundown warehouse. This had to be Vincent Cortez, the man from David's photo. "Good morning, Sarah," he said pleasantly, as if they were meeting for coffee instead of in a kidnapping scenario. "I hope you slept well. The drug we used is very mild. You shouldn't have any lasting effects." Sarah's throat was dry and her head felt fuzzy. "Where am I?" "What do you want from me?" "You're somewhere safe. As for what I want, that's a bit complicated." Cortez stood up and walked around the table. "Tell me, what do you know about your father's work?" "He was an accountant. He did taxes for small businesses. There's nothing interesting about it." Cortez smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's what everyone was supposed to think. "Your father was very good at his job, Sarah. Much better than anyone realized." "I don't understand." Robert Martinez wasn't just doing taxes. For the past 15 years of his life, he was laundering money for some very important people. Millions of dollars passed through his books, all of it cleaned and legitimate by the time it came out the other side. Sarah shook her head. "That's impossible. My father was an honest man. He would never do anything illegal." "Oh, but he would." "And he did. You see, your father got involved with the wrong people when you were still in high school. He had some gambling debts, and when he couldn't pay them back, my associates offered him a deal. Help them with their bookkeeping, and his debts would disappear." "You're lying." Cortez pulled out a tablet and showed her a series of documents. They looked like bank statements and financial records. Sarah could see her father's signature on several of them, along with numbers that didn't make sense for a small accounting firm. "Your father was very careful, very smart. He created an entire network of shell companies and false transactions. But he made one crucial mistake. He kept backup records of everything, hidden away where he thought no one would ever find them." Sarah's mind was racing. "Even if that's true, what does it have to do with me? I don't know anything about his business. But you do know where he kept his important papers, don't you? You cleaned out his house after he died. You went through all of his belongings. I gave everything to charity or threw it away. There was nothing valuable." Cortez sat back down and leaned forward. "Sarah, 3 days after your father's funeral, someone broke into his house. They tore the place apart looking for something. But they didn't find it because you had already taken it. Taken what? I don't have anything. A safety deposit box key. Your father rented a box at First National Bank under a false name. Inside that box are copies of every transaction he ever processed for us, along with the real names and account numbers of everyone involved. That information is worth a lot of money to some people, and it's worth even more to the people who want to keep it secret. Sarah tried to remember cleaning out her father's house. It had been a heartbreaking process going through his belongings and deciding what to keep and what to let go. She had found some important papers in his desk drawer, his will, insurance documents, tax records. But she didn't remember any safety deposit box key. I don't have any key, she said. I've never seen one. Maybe you didn't recognize what it was. Safety deposit box keys are small and simple. It might have looked like just another house key or office key. Sarah thought harder. There had been a key ring in her father's desk with several keys on it. She had kept them, thinking they might be for doors or cabinets in the house. They were still in a drawer in her kitchen at home. Cortez seemed to read her expression. You remember something? Even if I had this key, why would I give it to you? You kidnapped me. Because, Sarah, you're not the only one looking for those records. The FBI has been investigating your father's death for 2 years. They think it wasn't an accident. They believe someone killed him to prevent him from talking. This hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father's death had been ruled an accident. His car had skidded off a wet road during a rainstorm. There had been no signs of foul play. The FBI thinks my father was murdered. They do, and if they find those records before we do, a lot of innocent people are going to go to prison. People who were just trying to make a living and got caught up in something bigger than they understood. Innocent people, you're criminals. Cortez's expression hardened. The world isn't as simple as you think, Sarah. Sometimes good people have to make difficult choices to survive. Your father understood that. My father would never have helped criminals willingly. You're right. He didn't want to help us at first. But when we explained that his gambling debts weren't just about money, that the people he owed were prepared to hurt his family if he didn't pay, he became much more cooperative. Sarah felt sick. You threatened us? We protected you. Your father's cooperation kept you and your mother safe for 15 years. But now he's gone and that protection is gone with him. Unless you help us finish what he started. What do you mean? We need those records so we can destroy them. Once they're gone, this whole thing disappears. You can go back to your normal life and no one will ever bother you again. And if I don't help you? Cortez was quiet for a long moment. There are other people looking for those records, Sarah. People who are much less reasonable than I am. If they find you first, they won't be as patient or as polite. Who are these other people? Former business partners who feel your father betrayed them. Government agents who want to use the information to destroy everyone involved. Foreign investors who lost money when your father's operation was shut down. Take your pick, Sarah's head was spinning. Nothing about her quiet, ordinary life made sense anymore. How do I know you're telling the truth? Cortez pulled out his phone and showed her a news article from 2 years ago. The headline read, Local accountant dies in car accident under investigation. The article was short, but it mentioned that the FBI was looking into Robert Martinez's death as part of a larger investigation into financial crimes. This is real, Sarah. All of it. Your father was in deep with dangerous people, and now you're caught in the middle. The only way out is to help us end this. What exactly do you want me to do? Tomorrow morning, you're going to go to First National Bank. You're going to use the key to open your father's safety deposit box. You're going to take everything inside and bring it to us. Then this nightmare will be over. And if I refuse? Cortez stood up and walked toward the door. Let me show you something. He led her to a window that looked out over the warehouse floor. Below, Sarah could see David Chen tied to a chair, blood on his face and shirt. 2 men stood nearby watching him. Mr. Chen thought he was being clever by warning you about our arrangement, but we've been watching him too. If you don't cooperate, he's going to pay the price for his interference. Sarah's heart sank. David had tried to help her, and now he was in danger because of it. Don't hurt him. This isn't his fault. That's entirely up to you, Sarah. Help us get what we need and everyone goes home safely. Refuse, and Mr. Chen becomes an example to anyone else who might think about interfering with our business. Sarah realized she was trapped in a situation with no good choices. But she also realized that Cortez and his people had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that because she was an ordinary person, she would be helpless and passive. They didn't know that growing up with an accountant father had taught her to pay attention to details and think logically under pressure. As Cortez led her back to the table, Sarah began to form a plan. Sarah spent the rest of the day in the warehouse, her mind working constantly. Cortez had left her alone with 2 guards who barely spoke and seemed more interested in their phones than in watching her closely. She used this time to observe everything around her, the layout of the building, the number of exits, the guards' routines, and most importantly, the sounds from outside. Based on the traffic patterns and the type of vehicles she could hear, Sarah figured they were in an industrial area, probably near the port. The guards changed shifts every 4 hours, and during the changeover, there were always a few minutes when only one person was watching her. As evening approached, Cortez returned with takeout food and sat down across from her again. He untied her hands so she could eat, but kept her ankles bound to the chair. "Have you thought about our conversation today?" he asked, opening a container of Chinese food. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," Sarah replied, carefully eating her noodles. "Like how you knew so much about my father's business if he was really as careful as you claim." Cortez paused with his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean? You said he was smart and careful, that he created shell companies and false transactions that no one could trace. But somehow you have detailed records of everything he did. That doesn't make sense unless someone was watching him very closely. We kept our own records, naturally. Or unless someone inside his operation was reporting back to you." Sarah watched Cortez's face carefully. "Someone he trusted. Your father worked alone, did he? Because I remember him mentioning a business partner a few times over the years. Someone named Marcus who helped him with the computer systems. I never met Marcus, but my father talked about him like they were close friends." Cortez set down his chopsticks. There was no Marcus. "Then who was the man who came to my father's funeral?" "Tall guy, about 40, dark hair. He told me he had worked with my father for years and that he was sorry for my loss. He seemed really broken up about it." Sarah was making this up, but she could see that her words were having an effect. Cortez looked uncomfortable for the first time since she had met him. "A lot of people came to the funeral. This man knew details about my father's work that only a close partner would know. He also asked me if my father had ever talked about keeping backup files. At the time I thought it was a strange question, but now it makes more sense." Cortez stood up abruptly. "Finish your food. We have a long day tomorrow." But Sarah wasn't done. "The funny thing is, this Marcus looked a lot like one of your guards. The tall one with the scar on his chin. Same build, same way of moving. It's almost like he's been watching my family for years." "You're imagining things." "Am I? Because if Marcus was working for you all along, then you already know everything that was in my father's records. You don't need the safety deposit box at all, which means this whole thing is about something else entirely." Cortez stared at her for a long moment. Sarah could see him trying to decide how much to tell her. Finally, he sat back down. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," he said. "Yes, Marcus worked for us. He's been watching your father for 8 years, making sure he stayed in line and didn't try to run or make copies of sensitive information. But my father did make copies. That's why we're here. Your father got nervous toward the end. He started talking about wanting out, about going to the FBI and making a deal. Marcus tried to keep him calm, but your father was determined to leave the business. So you killed him." "No. We were going to let him go. The operation was winding down anyway, and we had already moved most of our business to other accountants. But someone else found out about your father's backup records, and they decided he was too dangerous to leave alive." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Who?" "The people your father was laundering money for. They weren't just ordinary criminals, Sarah. They were connected to international organized crime, human trafficking, arms dealing. Very dangerous people who don't like loose ends. And now they want the records to destroy them?" "No. They want the records to find out who else your father was working with. You see, your father wasn't just cleaning money for one group. He was working for several different organizations, all of them thinking they were his only clients." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to understand the implications. He was playing them against each other? Not intentionally. Your father was just trying to make enough money to pay off his original debts and get out. But when you're laundering money for the Russian mob and the Colombian cartels at the same time, things can get complicated very quickly. So these people killed him to get information about their competitors. They tried to make it look like an accident, but they didn't find what they were looking for in his house. That's when they realized he must have hidden the records somewhere else. And you want to find them first? Cortez nodded. We were your father's original employers. We have the most to lose if those records become public, but we're also the only ones who might be willing to let you live once we have them. Sarah felt sick. You're saying that no matter what I do, I'm going to die? Not necessarily. If we get the records first, we can destroy them and eliminate the threat. Then everyone can go back to their normal lives. But if the other people find them first, then they'll use the information to destroy their enemies, and anyone who knows about the records becomes a liability. That includes you, me, Marcus, David Chen, and anyone else who's been involved in this situation. Sarah looked out the window toward where David was being held. How do I know you're not just using me to get the records so you can sell them to the highest bidder? Because I'm already rich, Sarah, I don't need the money. What I need is for this problem to go away so I can retire in peace. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only one who's been honest with you. Marcus wanted to just take you to the bank and force you to open the box. The other groups would have tortured you until you told them everything you know. I'm giving you a choice. Sarah thought about this. It was true that Cortez could have simply kidnapped her and forced her to cooperate. Instead, he was trying to convince her that helping him was in her best interest. What happens to David if I help you? He goes free. I'll give him enough money to disappear for a while until this blows over. And what happens to me? You go back to your life. We'll provide you with security for a few months until we're sure all the other interested parties have given up looking for the records. Sarah made her decision. Okay, I'll help you. But I have conditions. What conditions? First, I want to see David right now to make sure he's okay. Second, I want you to untie me. If we're really working together, I shouldn't be treated like a prisoner. Third, I want to understand exactly what we're going to do tomorrow so there are no surprises. Cortez considered this. Agreed. But if you try to run or signal for help, David will pay the price. I understand. Cortez untied her ankles and led her downstairs to where David was being held. The private investigator looked terrible, bruised and exhausted but alive. When he saw Sarah, his eyes filled with relief. Are you okay? He asked. I'm fine. We're going to get out of this. David looked confused. What's happening? Sarah knelt down next to his chair. I'm going to help them get what they want. Then they'll let us both go. Sarah, you can't trust them. I know. But right now, it's our best option. As they walked back upstairs, Sarah felt like she was making a deal with the devil, but she also felt like she was finally starting to understand the real situation, and understanding meant she could start looking for ways to take control. Tomorrow, she would go to the bank and open her father's safety deposit box. But she wasn't planning to simply hand over whatever she found to Vincent Cortez. She was planning to find a way to use it to save herself, David, and anyone else who might be caught in this dangerous game. The question was whether she was smart enough to outmaneuver people who had been playing this game much longer than she had. The next morning, Sarah woke up on a cot in a small office at the back of the warehouse. She had barely slept, spending most of the night thinking about what she was going to do at the bank. Cortez had explained the plan in detail, but Sarah had her own ideas about how things should go. Marcus, the man who had been posing as her father's business partner, brought her coffee and a bag with clean clothes. He was exactly as she had described to Cortez, tall, dark-haired, with a scar on his chin. Up close, she could see that he was nervous about something. Time to get ready, he said, avoiding her eyes. We leave in an hour. You were at my father's funeral, Sarah said quietly. I wasn't making that up yesterday. Marcus paused at the door. Your father was a good man who got in over his head. I tried to help him, but he wouldn't listen. Help him how? I told him to destroy the backup records and walk away. I told him that keeping them was dangerous for everyone, including his family. But he said they were his insurance policy. Insurance against what? Against us. He thought that if he ever needed to make a deal with the FBI, those records would be his ticket to witness protection. Sarah felt a pang of sadness. Her father had been trying to protect his family the only way he knew how, but his plan had ended up putting them in even more danger. Do you really think Cortez will let us go after we get the records? Marcus finally looked at her directly. I think Vincent believes he will. But there are other people involved in this decision, and they might feel differently. What do you mean? Vincent is old school. He believes in honor and keeping his word. But his partners are younger, more ruthless. They think anyone who knows about this operation is a liability, including you, especially me. I've been on the inside for 8 years. I know everything. Sarah realized that Marcus might be as trapped in this situation as she was. Why are you telling me this? Because your father asked me to look out for you if anything ever happened to him. He made me promise. Then help me figure out a way to get everyone out of this safely. Marcus was quiet for a moment. There might be a way, but it's dangerous and it would require perfect timing. Tell me, the bank has security cameras everywhere. If something goes wrong while we're there, if there's any kind of disturbance, the police will respond within minutes. That could be our chance. And what kind of disturbance? I don't know yet, but I'll think of something. Before Sarah could ask more questions, Cortez appeared in the doorway. It's time to go. Are you ready? Sarah nodded, even though she felt anything but ready. The three of them walked to a black SUV parked outside the warehouse. Marcus drove. Cortez sat in the passenger seat and Sarah was in the back. As they pulled out onto the street, Sarah tried to memorize their route so she could find her way back if necessary. The First National Bank was in downtown Seattle, a tall glass building surrounded by busy streets. Cortez had chosen it specifically because it would be crowded and public, making it less likely that their competitors would try to intercept them there. Remember, Cortez said as they parked across the street, we go in together. You ask to access your father's safety deposit box. I'm your uncle and Marcus is your cousin. We're here to help you go through your father's belongings. What if they ask for identification? Marcus has a fake ID with the right last name. The bank clerk won't question a family member being present, especially if you seem upset about your father's death. They walked into the bank together. Sarah's heart was pounding, but she tried to look calm and sad like someone dealing with the aftermath of a family tragedy. The lobby was busy with customers and employees, just as Cortez had predicted. Sarah approached the customer service desk and explained that she needed to access her father's safety deposit box. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, was very sympathetic and asked for the key and proper identification. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she pulled out the key ring she had brought from home. There were 5 keys on it, and she wasn't sure which one was for the safety deposit box. The second key she tried worked. Box 1247, the clerk said, checking her computer. That's in our secure area downstairs. I'll need to verify your identity and have you sign some paperwork. The process took 20 minutes. During that time, Sarah noticed that Marcus kept checking his watch and looking around the lobby nervously. Cortez seemed calm, but she could see tension in his shoulders. Finally, they were escorted downstairs to the safety deposit box area. The clerk used her master key along with Sarah's key to open box 1247. Inside was a thick manila envelope and a small black USB drive. I'll give you some privacy, the clerk said, leading them to a small private room. Take as long as you need. When they were alone, Cortez immediately reached for the envelope, but Sarah stopped him. Wait, she said. I want to see what's in here first. Sarah, we don't have time to... You said we were working together. That means I get to see what my father left behind. Cortez reluctantly agreed. Sarah opened the envelope and found dozens of documents. Bank statements, transaction records, lists of names and account numbers. She recognized her father's handwriting on many of the papers. The USB drive contained digital copies of everything, plus what looked like audio recordings. Sarah's father had been more careful than anyone realized. This is everything, Cortez said, examining the papers. All the records from the past 15 years. This could destroy a lot of people. Or save them, Sarah said, depending on how it's used. What do you mean? These records don't just show illegal activity. They also show who was forced to participate and who was willing. My father documented everything, including the threats that were made against our family. Cortez looked at the papers more carefully. You're right. This could actually exonerate some of the people who were coerced into cooperating, which means it's worth more than just the information about criminal activity. It's evidence that could be used in court to help innocent people. Marcus spoke up for the first time since they had entered the bank. Sarah's right. This isn't just a list of crimes. It's a complete record of how the entire operation worked, including who the real criminals are and who were just victims. So what do we do with it? Sarah asked. Before Cortez could answer, they heard shouting from upstairs. Then there was the sound of breaking glass and car alarms going off in the street. Marcus looked out the small window. We have a problem. There are men with guns surrounding the bank. Cortez pulled out his phone and tried to make a call, but there was no signal. Someone's jamming communications. This is a professional operation. Who is it? Sarah asked. Could be any of the groups looking for these records, or it could be the FBI setting a trap. The lights in the building flickered and went out. Emergency lighting came on, casting everything in a red glow. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. We need to get out of here, Marcus said. Now. But as they gathered up the documents and prepared to leave, Sarah realized that this was the moment Marcus had been talking about. This was their chance to escape from Cortez and get the records to someone who could use them properly. The question was whether she had the courage to take advantage of the chaos that was erupting around them. Sarah, Cortez said urgently, stay close to me. We're going to get through this. But Sarah was already thinking about a different plan, one that might save not just her and David, but all the innocent people whose names were in her father's carefully documented records. The chaos upstairs was getting worse. Sarah could hear people screaming and running, and the sound of heavy footsteps moving through the bank lobby. Marcus was looking through the small window trying to see what was happening outside. There are at least 6 men with automatic weapons, Marcus reported. They're not police or FBI, these are professionals, probably military contractors. Who hired them? Sarah asked. Cortez was stuffing the documents into his jacket. Could be anyone. The Russians, the Colombians, or even our own people if they decided we've become a liability. Your own people would do this. Money changes everything, Sarah. What we're holding is worth millions to the right buyer, and it could destroy billions in illegal operations. Some people would kill their own mothers for that kind of leverage. Marcus suddenly stepped away from the window. They're coming downstairs. We have maybe 2 minutes before they find us. The safety deposit box area had only one entrance, which meant they were trapped. But Sarah remembered something from when they had first entered the building. The bank clerk had mentioned that the basement connected to the old steam tunnels that ran under downtown Seattle. Is there another way out of here? She asked Marcus. Not that I know of. What about the steam tunnels? A lot of these old buildings are connected underground. Marcus looked around the room more carefully. In the far corner, behind a row of safety deposit boxes, there was a metal door marked Authorized Personnel Only. It's worth a try, he said. Moving toward the door was locked, but Marcus pulled out a small tool and had it open in seconds. Behind it was a narrow maintenance corridor that seemed to lead deeper into the building. This is our only chance, Cortez said. But once we go in there, we might not be able to find our way out. Better than waiting here to be killed, Sarah replied. They could hear voices getting closer. The attackers were searching the basement systematically, checking every room. Sarah grabbed the USB drive and put it in her pocket while Cortez took the papers. The 3 of them squeezed through the maintenance door and found themselves in a concrete tunnel lined with pipes and electrical cables. The air was hot and humid, and the only light came from small emergency bulbs mounted on the walls every 50 feet. Marcus led the way, moving as quietly as possible. Behind them, they could hear the attackers breaking down doors and searching rooms. It wouldn't be long before they found the maintenance corridor. After walking for what felt like 20 minutes, they came to a junction where 3 tunnels met. Marcus stopped and listened carefully. I can hear traffic above us, he said. We must be under one of the main streets. Which way do we go? Sarah asked. Before Marcus could answer, they heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the tunnel behind them. Their pursuers had found the maintenance corridor and were following their trail. We split up, Cortez said. It's our only chance. Marcus, you take the left tunnel. Sarah, you come with me to the right. We'll meet at the warehouse in 2 hours. No, Sarah said firmly. We stay together. If we split up, they can pick us off one by one. Sarah's right, Marcus agreed. Our best chance is to stick together and find a way out of these tunnels. They chose the middle tunnel, which seemed to slope upward slightly. As they walked, Sarah could hear their pursuers getting closer. The concrete walls amplified every sound, making it impossible to move silently. After another 10 minutes, they came to a metal ladder leading up to a manhole cover. Marcus climbed up first and carefully lifted the cover just enough to see outside. We're in an alley behind some restaurants, he whispered down. I can see the back entrance to a hotel. If we can get there, we might be able to lose ourselves in the crowd. One by one, they climbed out of the tunnel. The alley was narrow and filled with dumpsters and delivery trucks. Sarah could smell food cooking and hear the normal sounds of city life, which seemed surreal after the underground chase. They made it to the hotel's back entrance, but as they were about to go inside, Sarah heard a familiar voice behind them. Going somewhere. They turned to see David Chen standing at the mouth of the alley. But something was wrong. He wasn't tied up or injured like he had been at the warehouse. He was clean, dressed in different clothes, and he was pointing a gun at them. David? Sarah said in confusion. How did you get here? How did you escape? I didn't escape, Sarah. I was never really a prisoner. The pieces suddenly fell into place in Sarah's mind. You're working with them. You were working with them from the beginning. Not with them, David said, gesturing toward Cortez and Marcus. Against them. I'm FBI, Sarah. I've been investigating this money laundering operation for 2 years. Cortez slowly raised his hands. Agent Chen, I presume. We should have known Vincent was too trusting to spot a federal agent. You've been watching me this whole time, Sarah said, feeling betrayed. The whole story about being hired to follow me was a lie. Not entirely. I was hired to watch you, but not by Vincent Cortez. I was assigned to keep you under surveillance because we knew that eventually someone would try to use you to get to your father's records. So you knew about the safety deposit box? We suspected your father had hidden backup records somewhere, but we didn't know where. We needed someone to lead us to them. Sarah felt sick. You used me as bait. We protected you, Sarah. Do you think it's a coincidence that you made it out of that coffee shop alive? Or that you survived a night in Cortez's warehouse? We've been watching every move, ready to intervene if things got too dangerous. What about the men who attacked the bank? FBI tactical team. We needed to create enough chaos to flush out everyone who was interested in those records. Now we know who the major players are. Marcus laughed bitterly. Very clever, Agent Chen, but you made one mistake. What's that? You assumed that Vincent and I were the only ones Sarah needed to worry about. But we've been protecting her too, in our own way. The people who are really after those records haven't shown themselves yet. David's expression changed. What do you mean? Check your radio, Agent Chen. Ask your backup team how they're doing. David touched his earpiece and Sarah could see his face go pale. Base, this is Chen. What's your status? The response came through, crackling with static. Chen, where are you? We're under attack. Multiple hostiles with heavy weapons. We need immediate backup. You see, Cortez said calmly. While you were busy setting up your elaborate sting operation, the real players were setting up their own operation. They used your FBI raid as cover to eliminate the competition and take the records for themselves. Sarah looked around the alley, suddenly realizing they were all in more danger than ever. The attackers at the bank hadn't been random criminals. They had been waiting for the FBI to make their move so they could take advantage of the chaos. Who are they? David asked, his gun still trained on Cortez, but his confidence clearly shaken. The people your father was really afraid of, Marcus said to Sarah. The ones who killed him when he tried to get out. Before anyone could respond, the sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of the bank. Then they heard vehicles racing through the streets and men shouting in what sounded like Russian. We need to get out of here, David said. All of us. Right now. But as they started to move toward the hotel entrance, Sarah realized that their real problems were just beginning. The USB drive in her pocket contained information that multiple groups were willing to kill for. And she was starting to understand that nobody, not Cortez, not Marcus, not even the FBI, had been telling her the complete truth about what was really at stake. They made it into the hotel through the service entrance, but Sarah could tell that David was struggling to maintain control of the situation. His FBI backup was under attack, his carefully planned operation was falling apart, and he was now responsible for protecting the same people he had been investigating. The hotel lobby was crowded with tourists and business travelers, which provided good cover, but also meant that innocent people could get hurt if the violence followed them inside. David led them to a quiet corner near the elevators where they could talk without being overheard. I need to call for backup, David said, pulling out his phone. Your backup is already compromised, Marcus pointed out. Whoever these people are, they knew about your operation in advance. They're probably monitoring your communications too. Sarah was trying to process everything that had happened. David, when you first approached me in the coffee shop, were you telling the truth about anything? Some of it. I really am FBI, and I really have been investigating your father's death. But I wasn't hired by Vincent Cortez. I was assigned to watch you because we knew that eventually someone would try to use you to find your father's records. How long have you been watching me? 6 months. We've had agents keeping an eye on you ever since we discovered that your father's death wasn't an accident. Cortez was scanning the lobby, watching for any signs of danger. Agent Chen, while I appreciate that you're finally being honest with us, we have more immediate concerns. Sarah is carrying information that several very dangerous groups want, and this hotel isn't going to be safe for very long. What do you suggest? We need to get somewhere secure where we can figure out what's really in those records and decide how to use them. Sarah pulled the USB drive out of her pocket and looked at it. Such a small thing to have caused so much trouble. Maybe we should just destroy it. If the information is gone, then there's nothing for anyone to fight over. It's not that simple, Marcus said. Your father documented a lot of crimes, but he also documented a lot of coercion. There are people who were forced to participate in money laundering, who could be cleared if this information comes to light properly. But there are also people who could go to prison for the rest of their lives, Cortez added, including some who are in very powerful positions. David nodded. That's why the FBI has been trying to get these records. We need to understand the full scope of the operation before we can decide how to proceed. And that's exactly why the other groups want to destroy the records, Marcus said. They can't risk having their activities exposed. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. Why should I trust any of you to make the right decision? David, you've been lying to me from the beginning. Vincent, you kidnapped me. Marcus, you've been spying on my family for years. Because right now we're all in the same situation, Cortez said. If the wrong people get those records, we're all dead. Our only chance is to work together. Before anyone could respond, Sarah noticed a man in a dark suit watching them from across the lobby. He was trying to look casual, but his attention was clearly focused on their group. We're being watched, she said quietly. David followed her gaze. I don't recognize him. He's not one of ours. Marcus studied the man for a moment. Russian, probably Bratva. They move differently than American criminals. How can you tell? 8 years of watching these people. You learn to recognize the signs. The man in the dark suit pulled out his phone and made a brief call. Within minutes, Sarah spotted 2 more men taking positions near the hotel exits. They're surrounding us, David said. We need to move now. But as they started toward the elevators, Sarah had an idea. Wait, what if we don't run? What do you mean? What if we make them come to us, but on our terms? Sarah walked over to the hotel's concierge desk and asked to speak to the manager. When a well-dressed woman appeared, Sarah explained that she was being followed by dangerous people and needed help. I'm going to call the police, the manager said immediately. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. Within 10 minutes, the hotel lobby was filled with Seattle police officers. The men who had been watching them quickly disappeared, not wanting to risk a confrontation with law enforcement in such a public place. Clever, Cortez admitted, but this is only a temporary solution. They'll wait for us to leave and follow us again. David was talking to the police officers, showing them his FBI credentials and explaining the situation in general terms. After a brief conversation, he came back to the group. I've arranged for police protection while we figure out our next move. But we can't stay here indefinitely. Where can we go that's truly safe? Sarah asked. Marcus thought for a moment. There might be one place. Your father mentioned it once when he was talking about contingency plans. He said if things ever got really bad, there was a safe house that some of his early clients had set up for emergencies. You mean criminals set up a safe house? Former criminals. People who got out of the business and went legitimate. They keep the safe house available for situations exactly like this one. David looked skeptical. How do we know we can trust these people? We don't. But they have as much to lose as anyone if these records become public. Some of them are probably mentioned in your father's files, Sarah. They'll want to make sure the information is handled carefully. Sarah was tired of running and hiding. Fine, let's go to this safe house. But I want to make something clear to all of you. She pulled out the USB drive and held it up. This belongs to me. It contains my father's work, and he died trying to protect the information on it. I'm willing to work with all of you to figure out the right thing to do, but I'm not going to be anyone's puppet or pawn anymore. What are you saying? Cortez asked. I'm saying that when we get to this safe house, we're going to look at everything on this drive together. We're going to understand exactly what my father documented, and then we're going to decide as a group how to handle it. No more secrets, no more lies, no more hidden agendas. David nodded slowly. That sounds fair. And, Sarah continued, if any of you try to betray the others or take the information for your own purposes, I'll make sure it gets released publicly in a way that damages everyone equally. Marcus smiled. Your father would be proud of you. I hope so. Because I have a feeling that the hardest part of this whole situation is still ahead of us. As they prepared to leave the hotel under police escort, Sarah realized that she was no longer the frightened, helpless woman who had been followed home from work just 2 days ago. She was becoming someone who could stand up to dangerous people and make difficult decisions under pressure. But she also realized that the information on the USB drive was going to force her to make choices that would affect many people's lives. Some of those people were criminals who deserved to face justice, but others were innocent victims who had been caught up in circumstances beyond their control. The question was whether she would be wise enough to tell the difference. The safe house was located in a quiet residential neighborhood north of Seattle, disguised as an ordinary 2-story home with a well-maintained garden and a white picket fence. The police escort dropped them off 3 blocks away, and they walked the rest of the distance to avoid drawing attention. Marcus knocked on the door using what appeared to be a coded pattern. After a few moments, an elderly woman answered. She was small and gray-haired, wearing a cardigan sweater that made her look like someone's grandmother. But Sarah noticed that her eyes were sharp and alert, constantly scanning the street behind them. Marcus, the woman said warmly. It's been a long time. Come in, all of you. They entered a living room that looked perfectly normal, with family photos on the mantelpiece and magazines scattered on the coffee table. But Sarah spotted small details that suggested the house was more than it appeared. Reinforced windows, multiple locks on the doors, and what looked like security cameras hidden among the decorative plants. This is Elena Petrov, Marcus explained. She and her husband Victor ran one of the most successful smuggling operations on the West Coast for 20 years before they retired. Elena laughed. That was a different life. Now Victor and I grow tomatoes and spoil our grandchildren, but we still help old friends when they need a safe place to think. She led them to the basement, which had been converted into a comfortable meeting room with computers, phones, and secure communication equipment. Victor was waiting for them, a large man with gentle eyes who looked like he could have been a construction worker or mechanic. Robert Martinez was a good man, Victor said to Sarah. He helped us clean up our finances when we decided to go legitimate. We owe him a debt. Sarah felt a wave of emotion. These were the first people she had met who spoke about her father with genuine affection and respect, rather than fear or calculation. Thank you, she said. I'm glad to know he had friends. Elena brought coffee and sandwiches while the group settled around a large table. Sarah placed the USB drive in the center of the table and everyone stared at it for a moment. Before we look at what's on here, Sarah said, I want everyone to agree on some ground rules. First, we all see everything together. No one takes information privately. Second, we make decisions as a group about how to handle what we find. Third, if anyone tries to betray the group or steal the information, the rest of us work together to stop them. Everyone agreed, though Sarah could see that David was uncomfortable with the idea of sharing FBI intelligence with criminals, and Cortez was nervous about exposing his operations to federal agents. Victor inserted the USB drive into one of the computers and began opening files. What they found was even more comprehensive than anyone had expected. Robert Martinez had documented 15 years of financial transactions, but he had also recorded conversations, saved emails, and created detailed profiles of everyone involved in the various money laundering operations. My God, David said, looking at the scope of the information. This could bring down dozens of criminal organizations and destroy hundreds of legitimate businesses that were forced to participate, Elena added, reading over his shoulder. Sarah was looking at a file labeled Family Protection. It contained audio recordings of threats made against her and her mother, along with documentation of the original gambling debts that had forced her father into the money laundering business. Listen to this, she said, playing one of the recordings. Her father's voice filled the room. Elena, if you're hearing this, it means something has happened to me. I want Sarah to know that everything I did was to protect our family. But I also want her to know that there are good people mixed up in this business. People who were forced to participate just like I was. Please help her make sure that when this information comes to light, justice is done fairly. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Even facing death, her father had been thinking about protecting innocent people. They spent the next several hours going through the files systematically. The information was organized by criminal organization, with separate sections for the Russians, Colombians, Chinese triads, and several smaller groups. But there was also a section labeled coercion cases that documented people who had been forced to participate through threats, blackmail, or violence. Your father was very careful about distinguishing between willing criminals and unwilling victims, Marcus observed. He documented everything: who initiated contact, who made threats, who profited from the operations, and who was just trying to survive. David was taking notes on a legal pad. This information could help the FBI build cases against the real criminals while protecting the people who were victimized by them. But only if it's handled properly, Cortez warned. If this gets released carelessly, a lot of innocent people will be destroyed along with the guilty ones. Victor had been monitoring police and FBI communications on a scanner. "We have a problem," he announced. "There are reports of armed men searching hotels and safe houses throughout the city. They're looking for Sarah and the information she's carrying." "How many groups are looking for us?" Sarah asked. Elena was tracking the radio chatter on multiple frequencies. "At least 3 different groups that we can identify. Russian organized crime, Colombian cartel, and what sounds like a private military contractor." "Private military?" David looked concerned. "That means someone with serious resources is involved." "Who would hire private military contractors for this?" Sarah asked. Marcus studied the files on the computer screen. "Look at this section your father labeled high-value clients. These aren't just ordinary criminals. These are politicians, business executives, foreign government officials. If this information becomes public, it could bring down governments." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "So what do we do? We can't hide here forever, and we can't let these records fall into the wrong hands. We need to be strategic," David said. "The FBI can protect some of the information and use it to build cases against the real criminals. But we need to be careful about timing and coordination. And we need to make sure the innocent people are protected," Elena added. "Some of the names in these files are people who have spent years trying to build legitimate lives after being forced into criminal activity." Victor had an idea. "What if we don't give the information to any one group? What if we control how it's released?" "What do you mean?" "We create multiple copies. The FBI gets the information they need to pursue criminal cases. The media gets the information about corruption and coercion. The innocent victims get advance warning so they can protect themselves. And we keep copies hidden in case anyone tries to suppress the truth." Sarah thought about this. It was risky, but it might be the only way to ensure that justice was done fairly. "There's one more thing we need to consider," she said. "My father is dead because of this information. How do we make sure that the people responsible for his murder are held accountable?" David pulled up a file labeled Death Threats Final Months. "Your father documented several specific threats made against him in the weeks before he died. With this evidence, we can build a murder case." Sarah felt a sense of closure beginning to form. Her father's death would not be in vain if his work could help bring justice for other victims and accountability for the real criminals. But as they prepared to put their plan into action, Victor's radio scanner crackled with an urgent bulletin. "All units. Armed suspects have breached the perimeter. Multiple hostiles approaching target location." Elena moved quickly to a wall panel and pressed several buttons. Steel shutters began to close over the windows, and Sarah could hear electronic locks engaging on all the doors. "It looks like they found us," Victor said calmly. "But this house has been prepared for situations like this. We can hold them off long enough to finish what we started." Sarah looked around at the group: an FBI agent, a money launderer, a criminal informant, and 2 retired smugglers, all working together to protect information that could bring justice to many people. She realized that her father had been right about one thing. There were good people mixed up in this dangerous business, and they deserved a chance to make things right. As the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air outside, Sarah made her final decision about how to handle her father's legacy. She was going to make sure that his careful documentation would serve the cause of justice, no matter what it cost her personally. The real test was about to begin.